Hi, this is Jean Marie Jobs. Welcome to the Feed Your Hero podcast. I'm so excited today to have one of my very favorite people in the universe here, Sonya Straub. And Sonya is the founder of FitnessRx and the Six Foundation. Sonya, welcome.
Thank you. It's really awesome to be here.
It's great to have you. Tell our listeners a little bit about both FitnessRx and the Six Foundation.
Yeah, so FitnessRx was founded in 2014. My concept there came out of being a trainer for about 10 years. I'd say I was a master trainer in various spaces and a professional sports performance sort of coach. What hit me in terms of wanting to found something by myself was the healing process, if you will, for rehabilitation. So we'll say like sore backs and sore knees. Within the industry that I was working was really quick and really profound for me. And I wondered why what I would call the civilian population didn't have access to that kind of sports therapy. So I decided to see if I could bring that into the community. And we had some really incredible results. So, simply put, I would call it professional sports level therapy brought to your community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And can maybe just to clarify, when you say you're a professional trainer, talk a little bit about your expertise and some of your certifications. To dumb it down so the rest of us can understand all your acronyms.
Yeah. So I came out of the Pilates world really in the space of that. After you have 10,000 hours of practice, you're considered a master trainer. Really, the specialty for me there was dealing with spinal pathologies and who we would call special pops. So knee replacements, spine issues, chronic and acute pain, and we would coach movement for rehabilitation and towards rehabilitation. At that point, after I reached master and realized I really enjoyed the rehab space, I began to get functionally and clinically credentialed in areas of manual therapy, so something called active release techniques, neurokinetic therapy, different kinds of gait, which is just how you walk through space. I would say modalities that help you understand how come and where and why pain is happening, and then to coach or treat out of that. Yeah.
Great. And so with the Sixth Foundation, is that similar work? Tell me about that.
Yeah, you saw my smile on my face there. Essentially what happened with FitnessRx was great. I opened up. I was a single mom at the time. I can distinctly remember moments of kind of taking that leap when you're going to start a company and working all day. I was actually sleeping on the floor, believe it or not, and just put all of my resource into this company. At a certain point, I did start to treat for professionals. So at one time, I was flown to Florida. We went to Daytona. I was working for Ferrari, and I thought I had arrived, right? And then I'd go home and give the same medicine to people that worked at Safeway, like those blue collar people, my people. And something hit me where I realized it didn't actually fulfill my soul, if that makes sense, my spirit. And I had always had a space in my heart and a container for veterans and for responders. And I was just curious about basically how they were getting treated. What was their medicine like? And, I think it's popular to think the VA doesn't do that good of a job. I really didn't know. I just thought, I'm just going to treat vets. This is going to be great. and firefighters and cops and be easy peasy. And it was not easy. It was not easy peasy. I distinctly remember at one point when I decided to start volunteering for this population, I walked into the VA and said, "Hey, I'm really good at my job. You should let me treat your veterans." And the admin looked at me and said, "Oh, you can lick stamps." And I was so defeating.
Yeah.
I actually sat in the waiting room and met some guys and ended up treating them in the waiting room, and that sort of snowballed. But what I found through that work and what really formed the foundation was that not only was there a huge need for the rehab space for our veterans, and for responders. Responders are essentially professional athletes. If you take into consideration what firemen and policemen are doing with their bodies all day. There was this container missing for professionals that understood the demand of the nervous system to sort of marry that into what we understand about movement. And know that, these guys aren't going to have the same pain scale. Their structures aren't going to work the same. If we're not sleeping, what's going on? And I began to really go back to study what I would call, in a broad sense, neurokinesiology, and treat the best that I could according to that knowledge. And that really is what birthed the Six Foundation. The results that I saw were astounding. And honestly, I think part of it was me just having an open door and being ballsy and loving as hard as I could. I didn't go anywhere. It took a really, really long time. I'm 8 and 9 years in, and we're just sort of getting a lot of, I'd say, ground in terms of public sponsorship. But the guys and their families started coming in as soon as I really put my feet down in the ground, for recognizing holistically what needed to happen in terms of their therapy. And I could go on and on about the stories, because it just blows my mind. I'm quite honored to be in the space that I'm in.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So, and the Six Foundation is a nonprofit.
Yes. So the Six Foundation, again, I started off, I committed to just not getting paid for any veteran that came in, with all of the resource that came in from FitnessRx. So I just didn't charge vets. And then I scaled by about 60% plus any firefighters or police officers that came in. And I actually just paid for it with all the revenue from FitnessRx, until both got bigger than me, and then realized we needed to found a nonprofit. So I've been doing this work since 2014. We've been an official nonprofit for about 2 years. And it was self-sponsored. I can tell you there's these memories. There was a particular month as a single mom where I didn't have the money to pay rent. And all of my clients one week were vets. And it was one of those, like, okay. And I ended up getting one of those random, like, $1,000 checks in the mail, the day before, that was from, I don't even remember where it was from, but so much story like that. Even how I got credentialed, because I'm not a doctor. I'm really a very educated trainer. Has been, I have to call it miraculous where we landed, but we have even up until hopefully the end of this week been self-sponsored through FitnessRx. Oh. So, which is just, it was me working a lot. Yeah. I don't really feel, I love them. They become your family, these guys, you know, and they did actually become my family because I married a patient.
You snagged one.
I did. Go me.
Absolutely.
It was lots of heavily snagging. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that is amazing. And obviously difficult to scale unless you bring other people on. So I know you've done that, and that's you're building your business, and you've got another business partner, and that's really exciting.
Yeah.
So in those moments, I've built a business. I know you've built your business. I talk to people all the time that build businesses. I know there's moments that you could really go either way. You could go, you know what? Screw it. Forget it. I'm done. I can't. This is too much. And in those moments it seems probably like a pretty decent choice. There's something else that happens. There's something else that kicks in. It's like, you mentioned the word miraculous. I don't know. Maybe you can share for you, what is it that anchors you to this compelling future when things are just dire, when they look difficult or impossible, or, hey, this has never been done before in this space, and we don't even have the language for it to talk about it with people. What is it that draws you through? And I mean, I know your whole life story is probably multiple scenarios of this exact same dynamic. So how would you answer that question?
Yeah. There's things that I know and things that I anchor myself in. And people ask me a lot, why did you choose the veteran space? Why did you choose the responder space? Because I don't come from that. In my background, I was adopted to a lovely family and came out of really hell. I found out later, as I become an adult and research history, that I was born in a meth den. There was a lot of abuse going on. I did have memory of that. What I remember distinctly is the day that I got adopted with my twin brother. I can tell you detail after detail, and I was 5 years old. That feeling of complete protection, of somebody saying, I got your back, I got your six. The thing that resonates with me so strongly about the military space and about responders is that they are putting themselves on the line, ready to commit acts of violence when they know people are going to hate them on the other end. And they know that the care that they get back is not going to be large. And that blows my mind. It blows my mind. And I also, twofold in these two kind of different capacities, understand what it's like to be chosen. Like, oh, finally, like somebody sees me and chooses me. And I, with anybody that I meet in life, will run after being that person for them, because I know that changed my life, and it's going to change my grandchildren's life and their grandchildren's life. It changed the trajectory of my generations. So my stand is to be that for somebody that would take that kind of a stand for me. And the other thing is, I understand suffering, and I understand trauma, and I understand I haven't been to combat. I've never been a police officer. I've never pulled people out of a fire. But I understand within the abuse container where I come from what it's like to feel like nobody understands, right? And nobody cares. And this hurts and that hurts, and you can't quite navigate through. What's interesting, and I love that you said, is that there isn't a lot of language for what we do. And I can tell you that because there's a lot of feelings sort of flushed up to the surface all the time, in the last 2 years in both companies, I've been doing things and experiencing success that I've been working towards for 10 years. It's also, there was days where my husband literally got me out of bed. There's also the time that I wanted to quit, absolutely the most. And some days, honestly, it was my kids that got me up. It was my husband saying, you can do this. I was also just physically exhausted from all the work. But I have these images that I always think of. And one is, I sort of imagine like me holding a torch, or like, two swords with like thousands of military and firemen and police behind me, like being the voice and saying, I choose you. Like this culture can change. And the great thing is I get to experience that every day in my office, every single day, when I hear stories of, I thought I had to quit my job. I thought I couldn't feed my family. I thought I couldn't walk again. I was going to kill myself. Because I hear those stories daily. And I don't think it's me. I know it's not me at this point, but I do know the impact that one person's voice can have. I know that, sitting with the one of our battalion chiefs now, and the president of the fire union, and all these people that I would consider heavy hitters and politicians telling our story, I'm like, yeah, that thing about one person can make a difference, that's like a real thing.
Yeah, so, look over here.
That's always a huge anchor. Yeah, and some of it is about, I want my daughter to know that, but more than that, for our guys now, I am bound and determined to scream it as loud as I can. I remember as a young child hearing in training this quote, kick the darkness until it bleeds light. And, I sat down from one of our councilmen across the table from him at breakfast this week. And he said, Sonya, do you want to keep being undercover? And I was like, listen, man, I like it under there. I would prefer it under there. But this is, at this point, international and global change. So please help me scream. In that, that anchor is being that change and being the chooser. I choose you. I choose you. I choose you. And in turn, honestly, I feel like it's choosing the little girl that got rescued. I mean, I got rescued from police officers and CPS from my situation, and it's a huge deal for me. So
Yeah, wow, that's pretty compelling. So
Yeah.
what is what's one of your most memorable or favorite stories that just in the last few years of meeting,
Oh
treating,
man.
success, just something maybe that completely unexpected?
Yeah. There's a there's a lot. There's a lot. You know, I'm trying to sort through like a favorite. There's a I really love treating Vietnam veterans. Talk about a forgotten people, right? What's interesting about foundations now is that often military foundations get grants that restrict them to post 9/11 veterans. That's very common. So, Wounded Warrior, we've all heard of them. They can't. They're post 9/11. So we just keep on as a country like not taking care of our Vietnam guys. It's really disgusting, frankly. So one of my joys is open door for these guys, and they're just lovely little firecrackers. I'll never forget a gentleman named Ben that still comes in, 27 years in service. He came in on a cane, shuffling. He could barely walk. He was walking really, really slow, probably 60, not a super old guy. He has a lot of jumps. He's a jumper. He's in recon, South America, all over the world. He's in the Army. And we sat down. His back was just a mess. And I said, "Who's helped you? Who's helped you?" And he sat and started sobbing and said, "The last time I went to the VA, they had 8 pieces of paper total on me for my 27 years of service. And there was actually no mental health rating there. There was just some tinnitus, which is a slight hearing loss."
Wow.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, I got you. This team has you. And slowly but surely, he was where I really started to dig into the VA process. And I picked up the phone and banged on the doors until I could find somebody that could help me help him with just his whole life. And he went from that small piece of disability to now 75%. He still should be 100, but it was huge from paperwork. And he's actually training with our trainer now and walking. And I remember every time, sorry, I'm crying. Every time he comes in the door, I can't help but remember the cane and the shuffling. And it's such a driver because we failed him. Our country's failed him. And it makes me angry and also empowers me because, you can give somebody's life back to them from, ultimately tight hamstrings. It's like, we can get really complicated, or we can just look at somebody and say, "I'm going to spend the time it takes with you to give you your life back, to teach you how to breathe, basic things." This guy was having to drive 2 hours away to go to appointments that he was waiting for 6 months. And that is typical. I'll tell you, one more that's relevant for our community right now, because we've had 2 really massive fires. We had a gentleman come in that was also a combat veteran, but a firefighter with community connection. He was they call like a paraeducator, if you will, or a peer support firefighter, and he had been in both large fires. So they're wildland firefighters, where they're, I don't know that the community knows this, but they are sleeping standing up in all their gear, which is 100 plus pounds of gear. They have to get through really like 7 to 9 inches of hole sometimes to crawl through with all their gear on. They're pretty beat up. And he had been off of work for months, and thought, "I'm going to have to quit my job. I have no resource." A lot of times these people feel like they can't feed their families. "I can't feed my family, so I'm just going to take it and take it and take it and take it." And we checked him out, did some muscle testing. No joke, he had a really tight quad. That's what was wrong. That's what was wrong. And he had been waiting for months and months and months on end for MRIs, and just got told, like, here's some drugs, you're fine. So that cost my city over $100,000 for something that wasn't structurally wrong. Nobody had just given him any time. Aside from that, he was not veteran connected at all, which is not uncommon for our firefighters or for our police officers. So he had no reintegration into, I'll say, civilian life. And I have a lot to say about that, but that's a side note. That's a side note. Anyway, he went back to work the next day, and I rolled his quad out. And then we sat down and may or may not have had some bourbon, and I asked him how his wife was, which is huge. Because, you got to remember, this is a whole family element. So that story impacted me because really it's about taking the time and attention. I'm really good at my job and I'm really passionate. But the other part is, because our culture, in my opinion, doesn't really listen anymore, we've lost part of the impact that medicine can do or therapy can do, because we actually just don't listen. It was not a hard thing that I've done some really cool things with spines and stuff. It was not that. It was listening. I was listening. So,
and maybe just for a little more background for a listener, because it sounds like, oh, they just had to roll out his quad. Connect the dots.
That's what I did.
I know, but connect the dots mechanically.
Sure.
If the quad seizes up and it never releases, what else happens? So what's the chain that starts to occur?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. So ultimately he came in for knee pain, right? So there's lots of ways knee pain shows up. You can actually have pathology or injury. The way that he was describing his knee pain, if you're in my field, essentially tells you that the quad is tight. So he was having burning, radiating knee pain. This is what's interesting with our population of client. When somebody has been put under duress for so long, and again, this is a firefighter and somebody that had done multiple tours. He has multiple Purple Hearts also, which means he's seen multiple tours of combat, been an outstanding guy that's probably gotten blown up a couple times, and then went into massive wildfires. When your nervous system at a certain point just gets taxed, and usually also these guys aren't sleeping, sleep hygiene is really important, you actually will start to get false pain reception. Essentially, your nervous system, there's a really good book called The Body Keeps Score. Your nervous system says, I'm just going to pick somewhere to tighten up and hurt because I cannot actually mentally handle this anymore. We call that like a hypervigilant space. Your entire body just gets so tight that your joint space won't function normally anymore. And it can show up, my back hurts, my knee hurts. I'm not saying that there's not actually something wrong, because there is physical pain getting experienced. But oftentimes with people in high duress jobs like this, don't actually breathe. They don't breathe. They're essentially losing mobility in the joints, which is giving them, all kinds of, I call it like chafing, like tendonitis, tendinosis, things like that. They would call his particular pain a patellar issue. And we understand mechanically what's wrong, as in we rolled out the quad. And also in that session, here's breath technique. How do you sleep? Can I help you with that? Is there behavioral health? Behavioral health is important in the container of sports therapy, because when the body has asserted the only thing that's important is surviving, it's not an ideal climate, if you will, for rehabbing. Rehab, simply put, is relearning how to move something that's not moving well. We call it, right, an introduction to a new motor pattern. So we need to redo, something needs to be more mobile, something needs to be stronger, so on and so forth. Your nervous system does not have room for that input if I have to save all the people or I'm about to die is happening all the time, So, and I'm using layman's terms because it's important that our civilians understand this. That being said, behavioral health is near impossible for our responders and for our military to get. The wait time is ridiculous. Their suicide rates are climbing. In our particular county, this is the first time ever that we're having firefighters walk off the job in the middle of like putting a fire out, like hose in hand, leaving for behavioral health.
Yeah.
What's happening in terms of what we can detect is that they're going out on sports med when that's actually not structurally the issue, but they start to experience chronic and acute pain because there is no outlet, there's no breath, there's no sleep, because the nervous system mentally is so taxed. So in terms of the work that we're doing in the foundation, you're right, it wasn't just rolling out a quad. Thank you for that. It was acknowledging that all of that is going on and coaching through all of that. Usually by the time one of our responders or military comes in, it's under the guise of a sports therapy or a performance. And I have never had a negative situation in all of my years of practice suggesting that we move into behavioral health alongside sportsmen. Never. You know, when you really sit down and look and say, let's address this pain issue and the whole thing, you know, it's not been an issue. People get concerned about that a lot, and it's never happened.
Yeah, because you can't really separate.
No.
I mean, there's state, there's mechanics, there's physiology and mindset, and everything functions together. So if you pull one string, everything else is going to move, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
I think that's part of what I love about the work you do, and I love supporting the work you do and getting to work with you at times, is creating a more integrated or holistic approach so people aren't left with, all I need to do is roll out my quad. No, yes, and.
Yes.
Right? Yes, and there's all these other pieces. There's the hypervigilance, and there's the sleep hygiene, and there's the mindset or the trauma or the beliefs that play over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. Like, I have to fix everything, and what happens to your body, and the tightness that hypervigilance brings, and the attitude that comes with it, and how it impacts your family, and then how that impacts you. And it's just so... There's so many different things that are possible, though, and available to really provide a holistic and helpful scenario for people that we just haven't caught up yet as a country, and we need to catch up.
Yeah, we haven't caught up in Western medicine, and part of what I'm acutely aware of is language. So. Particularly in our county, we have a lot of what I would call holistic medicine, and it occurs to people as transient or hippie, right? Yeah. And it's in a negative way.
Yes.
What we haven't done with Western medicine that's real medicine is provide it enough so that people understand that acknowledging the whole entire system is actually the path to wellness. You know, I imagine in all of our populations for this foundation, you always think that no one else is coming. You're the only one, every single second. And I can imagine that when I was talking about my early childhood. I know what that feels like. I have to fix this. So, you know, the other part that's really important in terms of the holistic space is integrating our guys into a community and into a tribe, particularly in the space of war or kind of these giant fires. You know that a guy behind you or a girl behind you always has your back, and you're going to be okay. And even though I'm the only one, you sort of have your team. And the second that they leave the fires, they leave the station, they leave war, they're sort of looking for that same assurance, but we don't have the same training, and our container for life and for death and for a relationship is much different. Their relationship is based on, you will die for me, I will die for you. And that is this astounding testament of love. Oftentimes, by the time they go back into a civilian space and somebody wants to snuggle, it doesn't register, right? It's not the same. Yeah. And then you'll hear the story with relationship a lot. Somebody's like, well, why aren't you intimate? And they're like, but I'll die for you right now. And they will, right now. That is my testament of love. And so in bringing that back to a health space, what I mean is that when you're navigating that all the time and then trying to talk about behavioral health and mental health, it can't be lonely. Like, you know, nobody ever sort of healed in a behavioral health space alone. Like that doesn't
Exactly.
really work, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't really work. So, there's sort of this part A, part B, part C, where we have to and get to start with a veteran or start with a firefighter, but we have to understand that we have to impact this whole entire culture, which goes home with them, which is the breath work and which is the sleep hygiene and change the language of the whole entire tribe and family, and I think also coach what I was just talking about. Like, hey, actually your husband or your wife is this phenomenal expression of love. It just looks different, and I think that they would breathe a lot better, And the other thing is that I tell the guys all the time, like, I'm here. You're not actually the only one, even though God bless them and they are the first one that is, they're going to take a bullet or they're going to run into a fire. There are really amazing people that care for them and that love them and hey, you're okay. Yeah, and
just that the reality of community and the being able to receive as well as give, I think, is a huge mindset shift, because often you're used to just, I'm the guy or the person on the front line, I'm doing all the things, and now there's a space that you can also receive. And it doesn't mean you never give. It's just there's got to be a mutuality that happens in order for you to fully function, for there to be hope for something other than I live in survival 24/7.
Right.
Because no one can sustain that.
Yes. It's getting out of the spin of survival. And that always brings me right back into the grounding of looking at my mom and dad at 4 years old, coming out of, being raped and beaten and forgotten and passed around, and looking at mom and dad and knowing that I could receive and be in a community and getting out of that spin and going, actually you can actually have a hope for the future. That's such a lovely thing. And pain and that hope are so intertwined, and it's lovely, and it's hard to pull apart. But I'm here, like, I'm not going anywhere, and the tribe is growing.
That's awesome.
I have a reputation on the street. I'm a little tough.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I love that. I was thinking the other day, just in any context of redemption, it really presupposes pain and suffering and heartbreak and loss. Otherwise, there's no need for redemption. There's no need for hope. So it's this almost counterintuitive tension that you enter into something that looks completely devastating and stand in it in a way that births something so incredibly beautiful and miraculous and unexpected that it creates a huge space for people to come in and participate. And that's what I love about you and your work and the people that you serve. The community is fantastic. And if our listeners wanted to donate to the Six Foundation, how would they do that? Where would they find you?
So our website is www.thesixfoundation.org. It's
the number six?
Okay. Yeah, it's the number 6. And we're really pressing into funding right now on all ends through grants and donations, and I'm easy enough to get a hold of too. But we have a whole team now that's helping us move forward for these men and women and get more community support.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for listening. It's awesome.
Pleasure.
Thank you.